Welcome to Create If Writing, the podcast for writers and creatives dealing with the passion and the practice behind making good art. I'm Kirsten Oliphant, your host, and you can find more at createifwriting.com. I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of the show, Audible. There's nothing I love more than the feel of a real book in my hands. But that's just not my everyday. Right now, I do a lot more listening as I'm driving around in my car or at the gym or shuffling the kids around the house. Audible provides a great way to listen to your favorite books. With over 180,000 titles, you will find something that you love. To support the show and get a free trial, visit audibletrial.com/createifwriting. Hello and welcome to Create If Writing. In today's episode, I'm talking with Chad R. Allen. Chad has been working in publishing for over 16 years, which means he has seen giant changes take place and transitions that we have just watched from a distance. He's been right there up close. So it's a very exciting conversation to have with him. I was really surprised to hear some of the things he had to say about what traditional publishers think about self-publishing, and also the kind of hope and excitement that he has for books, despite the fact that he also gives some very realistic numbers that are sort of what publishers might be looking for when you send them a query letter. Don't despair. There's lots of hope to be found here, and also some really practical tools. I love Chad's book, Do Your Art, which is what he calls a manifesto. It's a very small book. You can read it in one sitting with some workbook-like pages asking you questions, just trying to encourage you to do the thing that you are passionate about doing, that you are skilled at doing. So I hope this interview is both tangible and practical in terms of what publishing looks like these days and what that landscape might look like, but also inspiring, making you think about what it is that you're passionate about. What is your art? Are you making time for it? Are you doing the things you need to do? Are you keeping your life in balance? I love talking with Chad, and I hope that you enjoy as well and come away with some great ideas and inspiration, and also some sort of concrete ideas of what you might need to do to take those next steps if you want to be a published writer. On today's episode, we've got Chad R. Allen joining us. How are you doing today, Chad?
I'm well. Thanks for having me, Kirsten.
And Chad works at Baker Books and has been in publishing for over, 16 years?
That's right. Yeah, I've been at Baker for over 13 and in publishing over 16.
Which is kind of a lifetime, really. That's a great career to have there. Since you've been working in publishing for so long, you have seen a time like very few other people have seen, with so many changes. So what has that been like to be a part of that? And how do you feel about the current sort of landscape of publishing?
Yeah, it has been a remarkable journey. I mean, I can remember as a kid going to my grandparents and asking them, like, what was it like before cars? Well, I think they're going to ask me what was it like before computers, because I remember those days. I remember when all the editing happened on paper and there was no such thing as an ebook, and the landscape has changed significantly. I'd say that the publishing industry is still a very healthy industry. When what happened in the music industry took place, I think a lot of people looked at publishing as the next place that would happen. And certainly there's been disruption, but there are still a lot of traditional publishers out there. Some have gone out of business or have merged with others. But what we saw in the music industry, at least up to this point, has not occurred in the publishing industry. So I think generally it's an essentially healthy industry. We could talk a long time about self-publishing, but I think traditional publishers still add value to the process, and that's why they're still in business. It's the other thing that remains constant, regardless of anything else, is the importance of great content. And so whenever I feel sort of frenzied because of all the changes, I remind myself that what matters is great content. And that tends to keep me focused.
That's a great baseline and kind of a great perspective as well. And I think a lot of people did have this fear that real books were going to go away and be replaced by all of our devices. But I think there is a permanence to real books in your hand that is not going to change, even as the digital landscape and marketplace shifts and changes and grows, which is neat. And I really like both. And I feel like for me as a reader, I read different things on my Kindle or my iPhone than I do in paper, like actual books. Like I read different kinds of things, which is interesting. I'm not sure if other people are like that as well, but I will never get rid of books, and I'm still definitely a book buyer of real solid books in your hand.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly physical books. The percentage of physical books we sell has gone down vis-a-vis electronic books. And it is an interesting study, people's reading habits and what they prefer in digital form versus physical form. I mean, let's remember that a physical book is a technology, and the question is it a durable technology when other technologies come onto the scene? And so far, it does seem like it's a durable medium. So we'll see if that. We'll see. I don't know if in 30 years it'll still have the place it has now. Or not. I mean, honestly, as a representative of traditional publishing, we're pretty agnostic about how people consume our content. We just want them to consume it. So, and of course, we want protections that come with the protection that should come with owning intellectual property and that kind of thing.
From a traditional publisher standpoint, then you kind of touched a tiny bit on self-publishing, but what sort of is the view kind of looking at from a traditional publishing arena, at self-publishing, and especially thinking of now versus back then? Is there a change? Is it still viewed the same, or how do you guys see self-publishing?
Right. Well, the first thing I'll say is that I think the times in which we live are pretty amazing. The idea that either of us, Kirsten, could publish a book in about a couple hours from now, if we had it done and it was ready to go, we could publish it to the world in a couple hours.
Yeah.
That is unprecedented, and it will never cease to amaze me that we can do that today. So that's exciting. I mean, just in terms of what is possible in terms of getting a message out there, that's exciting. And
I agree.
So, people, I think a lot of folks wonder if traditional publishing feels threatened by self-publishing. I wrote a blog post a little while ago about why traditional publishing should kiss self-publishing's feet. And the reason for that is because there's a number of reasons, but one of them is it means we have a place to send people when we decline them. Whereas in the past, their dream could have just died. These days, because of self-publishing, there's a viable option for getting your message out there. Also, we've seen in a number of cases where somebody has self-published, they sold a bunch of copies, and then we end up contracting that book and doing a traditional publishing version of the book. So self-publishing, rather than competing with traditional publishing, it can actually be a stepping stone to traditional publishing at some points, or in some cases. So I think especially if an author has a relatively small platform, meaning they don't have a significant means of bringing exposure to their own book, that self-publishing is a great way to work on that platform at the same time that they're getting their message out there beyond what was ever possible in the past. So I'm a fan of self-publishing. My own book, Do Your Art, was self-published for a variety of reasons. One of which is I wanted to do it quickly, and one of the I guess things you have to deal with when it comes to traditional publishing is that we still take a while
Yes.
to publish a book. Another reason is it's short and doesn't fit sort of the traditional, metrics when it comes to length and price and so forth. So made a lot of sense for me, and I'm a traditional publishing insider. So I hope that's encouragement to people who are thinking about it.
I think that it is, and I think one of the points you touched on is this idea of sort of possibility. I think that there's something really exciting about having more possibilities, because years ago, self-publishing was sort of what you did if you weren't good enough to get traditionally published. And it generally, if you said that you were self-published, meant oh, you're not a real writer, I think is how people read it. That's just what you chose to do. Whereas today, it may mean that you don't have a big enough platform. It may also mean that you're not a great writer. I think there's something to this idea of gatekeepers and people who know their stuff looking at work. But at the same time, I think there is so much opportunity. And I think for your book, Do Your Art, which I have as well, and I really would highly recommend to people. It's a great little book. It even has, it's almost like it's a book with a little part workbook in there as well, where you can fill in, you ask questions, and you want people to actually write down, what is your next step, and those kinds of things that really makes you think. But, you have that control, and you do have that ability to put it out more quickly. And I think the only exception I feel like for traditional publishing with the quick books are the ones where it's about some current event where if they don't get it out now, it won't matter.
Right. Yeah, we can move quickly when we have to, but we don't. It's not our preference.
Yes, so, yes, and there are good reasons for that as well.
Right.
Well, you touched also on platform, and that is such a I feel like that word is just everywhere for people, and it's very intimidating for a lot of writers and people in general. But is there some kind of magical number of email subscribers or Twitter followers in terms of having a traditional publisher take you more seriously or pick up your book? Where is what is there a number? Is there something magical that we need to do in terms of platform?
Well, that is a question I get a lot. And first I'll say, look, yeah, it is a bit daunting, but it's never been a platform has never been more accessible than it is today. I mean, in the past, it just wasn't even possible. You had to have a TV show or a radio show or be a speaker all the time. You had to, these traditional forms of media just were rare, and it was really difficult to, to sort of attract an audience to what you were doing. These days, with digital media, the internet, and social media and blogs, that opportunity is available in a way that it never has been before. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy. It does take time and effort. And by the way, the time and effort it takes varies from person to person. But it is possible. So the question you just asked about a number is one I get a lot, and I'll just say that I don't start sort of I don't raise my eyebrows, I guess, until I see about 10,000 email subscribers. So I know that's a big number and that can be scary, but even if you don't have that many, what I always advise writers is in your book proposal that you're submitting to a traditional publisher, focus on the growth that you've been able to, cultivate over some period of time, and then pivot in that section of your proposal and write your plans for growing your platform over the period of time between when the contract is published and when the book is published. When the book is signed and when the book is published. So by focusing on the growth you've seen up to this point, and then telling the publisher, here's what I'm going to do between now and when the book is released that is going to help me grow my platform, I think writers have at least a fighting chance of getting a book publishing contract and also creating a platform that is significant enough to result in book sales. I think 10,000 is the number that comes to my mind when I think about what's an impressive number. That's the number that comes to mind. But even 5,000 is interesting because I know as a platform builder how long it takes or how much work it takes to get that many subscribers. So, by the way, I do think email subscribers is the key metric. People talk about Facebook likes and Twitter followers, and those are important. But far more important is your number of email subscribers. So if you're looking for one way to focus your platform building efforts, I would focus them on growing your email list.
That's great advice. And does this hold true for fiction and nonfiction, or is there any difference between those two?
I'm a nonfiction guy, so I feel most comfortable talking about nonfiction. But I would think that what matters most, even for fiction, is email subscribers. The reason for that is as you know, Kirsten, I mean, when you put something in your Facebook feed, not everybody sees it.
Nope.
And Facebook wants you to pay for everybody to see it.
Yes.
Well, they can make that even more restrictive if they want to, anytime they want, because they own the platform. Twitter hasn't done that yet, but I know that that's kind of on the horizon, is that they will start to restrict tweets. And I can't speak much to Instagram or Pinterest. Whereas when you have an email list, you own that. That's a digital asset that you own, regardless of what Facebook and Twitter decide to do. So I just think that's the key asset to have in mind when it comes to building a platform.
That's great. And I think, like you said, it can be really daunting and very difficult. I think for me, in my experience and kind of what I've seen other people experience, that email list can be the hardest to grow. And I think, you can build a pretty large Twitter following pretty easily. I think Facebook is getting more difficult because, as you said, they really do want you to pay. And I think they're going to continue to move more and more in that direction based on, the past movements that they've made and what they've been doing with those algorithms. But, Twitter, when I look, I have a lot of interaction on Twitter, but when I look to see where people actually click through to my content, Twitter is one of my lower forms of, ROI. I don't see a lot of people clicking through. I get a lot of interaction. I get a lot of retweets and those sorts of things, but I don't get a lot of people coming to my site in the way that I'd want them to. Whereas, when I send out an email, especially, it's really hard when you get those unsubscribes once you have an email list set up. But someone told me something I thought was really important, is when you get those, to realize that's one person, one less person you have to pay for once you get to that paid level of subscribers, which you're definitely going to get by that 5,000 or 10,000 mark. You're going to be paying for a service, but it's also one less person that really isn't on your team. It's one less person that wasn't going to buy your book anyway. And so when you have that really engaged set of fans, whether that's a small number, and if it starts out small, having those people help you build your email list by sharing the things that you're doing and having people come around, I think is really good. So I do see the value of having that, small tribe that you do in a sense own the right to email them and getting more return for your buck. And I do see a lot more traffic and clicking and interaction and different things from my email list than I would even from Twitter. But it is a harder thing. And a lot of the people who sort of peddle that, here's 6 ways to grow your email list over 10,000 in a month. Well, most often the people that have those quickly growing lists are selling something. They're selling like the package of, sign up for my email list to get your free book on how to get 10,000 people on your email list. And I feel like, it's sort of this weird little circle of, wait, you just got me on your email list by selling me something on how to get on your email list. But for people who are, a fiction writer or a nonfiction writer, even, trying to find that way of offering value. And I think that's a little bit more difficult than some of these lists that grow quickly and giant very fast, that are sort of doing that through like a promise of money or some kind of quick growing value. So that's kind of what I see when I look out and see.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, the ways that I've seen my email list grow the fastest include webinars, guest posting, where at the bottom of the guest post, I have an incentive to sign up for my blog posts. I just recently did my first giveaway, and that was pretty good. Not as effective as like a great guest post opportunity, but still good. And my giveaway was some of my own content. So I was trying to make it so that if people are interested enough to sign up for stuff that I'm creating, for a possibility of winning that, then they're somewhat interested in what I'm offering. So I didn't offer, an iPad, because everybody and their aunt wants an iPad. I want my list to be, made up of people who are interested in what I'm doing. I'm glad you mentioned that about unsubscribes too. My advice there is turn off the notifications so that you don't get an email every time somebody unsubscribes. And secondly, you're right on. I mean, I think when people opt out, it just means that your list is getting what we say in the business, warmer. A warm list is a list that's really interactive and responsive to the things that you're sending to it. And so when people opt out, that just means your list is getting warmer.
Yeah, that's a great, I like that term of being warmer. I don't know if you've heard of noise trade, but that's another great way I found of list building. You can offer your content there for free and sign up as a writer. They have music as well, which I love. And in exchange, people give their email addresses to get the free product that you're offering, whatever, book or CD. And some people do like a sampler or sample chapters, and some people did a whole book. And recently I put a whole book of mine on there, and then kind of did a promotion through Noise Trade, and got, I think, a couple hundred email subscribers. But what was interesting about that is I sent a separate email to that group. I imported the list and sent an email that said, basically, I'd love for you to do one thing for me. And that one thing was to stay on my email list, and that they could opt out. And if they didn't opt out, I was going to kind of put them in with my main email list. And I had the highest open rates that I've ever had for any email when it was sent to that specific group. And I think it's because they were already interested in my work. Like you were saying, when you offered something that was free, that was yours. Because like you said, offering money, you can get some people, and you might find some people who are like, oh, wow, I really like this person. But that's not why they're there. They're there for the iPad. So. Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'll have to check out Noise Trade. I don't know much about it.
Yeah. I had a really good experience with them, and I found that really valuable, in terms of finding people who want my stuff, and then wanted to actually opened, such a high rate, opened that email from me, and then stayed on it. And I found the same thing. I did a couple different, when I had a good number, I'd import the next number, the next list, and all the lists, I had a really great open rate for those people. And I think it was because they were interested in what I was doing. And I also, even though I have MailChimp, which doesn't have some of the options of like Aweber, I have like I tried to make my unsubscribe box, when you click that unsubscribe, then you get an email, there's all these hoops to jump through, but I added in like a really goofy picture and kind of a little like, are you really sure that you want to leave, and in a way that was kind of fitting with my personality and what I write otherwise, to try to just remind them of who I am, in case they're like, what is this email that I'm getting, which, hopefully they know, but anything with infused personality, I think, of reminding them. And then some of them were probably like, yes, I definitely want to leave this list. But
yeah.
So what do you think writers can do then to balance the, platform building with the writing? Because that becomes a really big time suck, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, this is such a key part of the whole thing. We need to be thinking carefully about how to make this journey sustainable. Because the fact is, even if all we were doing is writing and platform building, that would be a lot. But most of us have families, social lives, we have spiritual lives. We have spouses who would like a little bit of our time, and work, oftentimes day jobs. So how do you manage all of this in a way that the journey is sustainable? And I think you need a plan. I think, you create a plan, and then you work that plan, and you designate time for both. And sometimes, like I'm in a season right now where I have this side project I'm working on, and I'm on deadline, and I just have to get it done. And so the social media is lagging a little bit, but I know that I'll get back to it, and I am doing a little bit as I can here and there. So I think giving ourselves some grace and having goals in mind, specific measurable goals, is always good. By the end of 2015, I want to have 2,000 email subscribers, and then coming up with a plan that's going to help you get there. I think those are key parts of this. But to do it in a way that's sustainable, that's not going to make you grumpy and annoying to be around, even to yourself. So. That's the best advice I can offer there.
I think that's great. And finding that balance, I think sometimes, I run across writers sometimes who, they get scared of this idea of platform and they don't want to do it. So they're like, well, when I finish my book, then I'll work on this. And I think, like you said, there's seasons where you may do it more heavily, but if you're going to completely wait until your book is all the way done before you start making an email list, well, then you're going to have a finished book, but no one's going to want to look at it because you don't have any kind of platform at all. No one knows what you're doing, and you haven't connected with people. Whereas I think some people do this really well when they find a way to connect with that audience and then kind of keep them in the loop along the way. Even, this is where my book is right now, and, sign up and, keep these updates going, and something where you're actually doing both at the same time. And I think for me, it gives a little bit of kind of a break from some of the writing. It gives me another kind of outlet that's different, so I don't burn out, if that makes sense.
That's good. Another tactic is to think about ways that creating content helps you build your platform. So are there things you're learning from writing your book that you could share on your blog that might be of use to people? And in sharing it, you're also helping yourself by thinking it through more than you would have if you weren't writing that blog post. Or are there excerpts of your book that make sense as blog posts? A lot of people wonder, if I do that, is a traditional publisher going to be upset with me? Not typically, for a couple of reasons. One, your book is inevitably going to be different from your blog post. Two, because people will pay for having that content between the covers of a book. There's value in the form of a book. So for at least those couple of reasons, I don't think people have to worry too much about, pre-publishing things on their blog. In fact, I think of John Acuff, whose first book was a lot of content from his blog stuff Christians like. So yeah, that's that. I think these are all things to keep in mind as we try to navigate, developing our writing craft, developing content, and at the same time, building a platform.
Well, I think too, considering kind of, as you've mentioned several times, connecting with your audience. If you think of platform building, that word for some people sounds so distant, whereas if you just think of it as you're just trying to find the people who want to read your book, think of it as in those simplest terms. It's like, oh, of course I want to connect with my readers. Well, these are your readers. Even if your book isn't there yet, that these are going to be your readers. That's who you're connecting with. It's not this weird mass of people and you're at some distance. I think, that idea of platform kind of creates that distance when really, we want it to be about connection. So I think thinking like you have mentioned a couple of times about connecting and finding ways to share the content. And I like that idea of sharing your content in a different form that gets people excited and involved. And there is still value in an actual book, even if you shared some of those things before. Well, I want to end the interview. I end all my interviews asking, what is inspiring you right now in this moment in your life?
What inspires me is serving people. I derive no greater pleasure than what happens when I'm working with a writer or a community of writers, and I'm helping them make this dream come true of writing and publishing a book. And I think this is an important message for us all to keep in mind. We often, sort of denigrate or belittle what we have to offer the world. The reality is everyone has things to offer to the world, and the world really needs those things from us. And oftentimes what we think is obvious is not obvious to other people, Yeah. So I just want to encourage your listeners by saying that they really do have things to offer the world, and the world really needs them to offer those things. So whenever I'm on the giving end of that, that's when I'm most inspired, when I'm able to help somebody move forward on this path.
That's great. And that's so encouraging, I think, for people out there. It can be very overwhelming to look out and see the sheer number of books on a shelf or the number of titles of ebooks on Amazon and publishers and people who are doing it well and people who have 1 million email subscribers, and you're wondering what value you have or what way you can access that. And so I think having people cheer you on and realizing that you do have a place and that there is somebody out there who wants to hear what you're saying from your voice and not from some other place. So that's so encouraging. Well, Chad, I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to speak with me about this. And I'm going to link to a lot. You have so many great posts. I wanted to maybe choose a few that I'm going to put in the show notes because there's so many just helpful resources for writers at chadrallen.com. But I'll put a few of my favorites on the show notes as well. But I really appreciate you coming on to talk about all of this with us. And I think it's been very encouraging. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirsten. Really appreciate it.
Okay, confession time. Are you feeling encouraged or discouraged? I have to confess that thinking about 10,000 email subscribers is very daunting. I feel like it took me forever to break 1,000. But I also feel like I keep coming back to this idea that that's the place to be, and that even though it takes more time to build an email list, it's a more authentic and more sustainable place to be growing. It's a place where you're really connecting with your audience. It's where you're really finding those people who are going to buy your work again and again and again. It's where you find your fans. Yes, I'm a little intimidated by those numbers, but I'm also really inspired by what Chad had to say, that we all have something, some message, some voice, some art that we have to share. And there's a place for it and there's an audience for it. Now, maybe that audience is not going to be 10,000 people, or maybe it won't be 10,000 anytime soon, but that doesn't mean you don't have a place. It doesn't mean that you don't have an audience that's ready to hear what you have to say. It just may not be the audience that you're dreaming of, or maybe it is, or maybe you'll have that audience in a few years. I'm leaving with some good knowledge and am trying to fight the intimidation and the fear with knowing that somebody out there wants to hear what I have to say, and somebody out there wants to hear what you have to say. Visit creativewriting.com to see the show notes. I've always got helpful links in there, some questions, and also my big takeaway for what stood out to me the most with the interviews. I'd love to hear from you. I'd also love if you left a review on iTunes, if that's where you're listening, so that I can get a gauge for what you like and what you don't like, or how the show's going for you. You can also shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. It's kirstenoliphant@gmail.com. Thank you, as always, for listening. I so appreciate your support. Let me know how we're doing. Let me know who you want me to talk to, and let me know what's inspiring you this week.